Furia was playing like that at some point. The more diversion you create in your playbook, the better it is in general, because you become less readable. And this is something that your team has to come to a conclusion. Because I know players, they hate playing stat strats. They would like to only default.
How do you divide your T side into defaults, where you're gonna take map control, like see what happens? So there's area of the map, but don't have the ending, right? It's gonna be an open round. How is that divided, like default rounds or set strats?
Honestly, this is something your team has to come up with, because I've played on teams where we were super execute heavy and we were just doing set strats from basically the beginning of the round, okay? And then we had teams where we were super default heavy and we were just doing defaults almost any time we could. Only time we didn't do defaults were when we had like tech 9s and we couldn't default. But that is super readable as well. You default all the time and then suddenly you have low buy. Obviously you're gonna block sides of the map instead, you know? So this is a balance you need to find within your own team. And honestly, the best teams, they found like a perfect balance between playing set executes from the beginning of the round, playing defaults that are just aggressive ones. You look for opening picks. Then you have defaults which are meant to take a space, area of the map. These are usually very good when you have a lot of utility. For example, when you're up 3-0 or something like that. So when you know the CTs cannot afford as much utility and they cannot contest parts of the map you're about to take. You have rushes. You could be like old ends with Snappy and you just rush all the time rush. Even if it doesn't make sense and you have AWP and you have full utility, you rush. It worked because it's not that expected. Or Furia was playing like that at some point, right? The more diversion you create in your playbook, the better it is in general, because you become less readable. And this is something that your team has to come to a conclusion. Because I know players, they hate playing stat strats. They would like to only default and get, because if you play stat strats, you take away a freedom of a player. You might as well, at some point, this will come to an argument in a team. Why are we playing only set strats? We're playing like robots, you know? We're only playing like we dry run on empty server, we go on the server, and then with that same strat against real people, and we're dying, okay? So people will complain that we're doing too much stat strats because there's no freedom in it. Whereas if you play defaults too much, players get to play freely their roles. They get extra freedom, but sometimes these players are doing mistakes. And these mistakes during defaults, the amount of mistakes you do is huge, no matter how much you dry run it. During set strats, not that much, because there's only one like approach to the round. You know how it's gonna go, you know where the flashes are gonna explode, you know how it's generally looking, right? But in defaults, tons of mistakes everywhere, and that's when people tend to fall into habit of not communicating good enough. You basically are being abused for the mistakes you're doing. You have a bad game, you start tilting a little bit, etc., etc. Again, defaulting a lot, not that great. So all I'm advocating for is balance here, and I know it's maybe not the answer you wanted to hear, because I'm trying to give you examples why I think both extremes are very, very bad. I don't see any team playing just set strats, and I don't see any team in top 10 right now playing just defaults.
Playing defaults is it takes a lot more time. Like you said, there's gonna be a lot of unexpected scenarios and different scenarios, and that's threats you're gonna get like more often than not the kind of same scenarios you fall into.
That's a great point. That, for example, set strats often gets you into the clutches, and if you have strong clutch players, then you want to play that kind of way, but you cannot overdo it. You have to balance it out with default sometimes. Let's say against anti-eco, you would play a default, or anti-force, you would play a default, or sometimes during the gun rounds, you would play default as well. But if you don't have that strong players in clutches, and you have great like players that thrive in chaos, you want to build around the default heavy team, because that's where you can create a chaos. You can create patterns with smokes and mollies. You can create a fake much better. All this go hand in hand with the quality of players you have on the team and what they prefer.